I quite like using my 1x42" strip sander that I built, unlike this one, which kind of sucks. So I thought, what about building a bigger version of that one, because I'd like a second one. And I figured the belts I should use would be something like this, 1.5 inches by 48 inches. And this belt actually was cut off of the edge of this belt, which is an old belt from this sander, but I don't need the belts to be that good for a strip sander. And the way I cut these off is just with this thing here, that's 1.5 inches wide. There's a utility knife blade clamped on here, and if I just run that along the inside with this edge guiding it, I can cut that strip off very accurately. So that way, when I have an old one of these belts, there's usually a bit of a good zone maybe on one edge. I can just cut that off and use it for that. Now, last time I used these roller skate wheels, but with a wider belt, that's not quite enough. So I already cut off some discs and glued those together in 2 layers to be about the right thickness for that. And I've been checking that I've got the holes on both sides in the same spot by just putting it between 2 nails and spinning it to make sure it doesn't wobble side to side. Kind of hard to do one-handed. Because if it does wobble side to side, it's not so much that I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned that the ball bearings are going to be seated in there crooked, and that's bad for the bearings. And I want to use this motor that came from a dishwasher, and I've already printed out the templates, and I spent quite a bit of time on CAD to really nest these together. These are basically the templates from this one, but modified quite a bit to make it a bit bigger, because these belts are also not just wider, they're also longer. So next step is to cut out a rectangle from this nice piece of Baltic birch that a fan of my YouTube channel has actually brought to me, because you can't buy that stuff locally. I'd like to just cut out pieces from the corner, that way the rest of the sheet stays in one piece. And now using my pretend CNC router to cut out all the pieces. And here's all my 18mm Baltic birch parts cut. And checking my time-lapse camera in that room, my total time in the room, including setup time, was 14 minutes. My pretend CNC is pretty fast. I want to seat some roller skate ball bearings in the sides of 2 of these wheels, and those are 22mm in diameter, and I even have a drill bit that size now, but that makes for a loose fit. So I'll just keep using this drill, which is one that I ground down a little bit a couple of years ago to make for a tight fit with these bearings. Now I have to carve those wheels perfectly round. Whoops. No tear out if I'm cutting in from both ends. I shimmed the back of the block of wood to tilt it forward and put a crown on the other wheel. I got 2 of the wheels shaped. This one is crowned for on the bottom. This one's cylindrical for the top. And this one I need to mount directly to the motor, and I figure I just want to keep it on that shaft, which means I need a hole that's big enough to put this through the enclosure. And there's this fan wheel thing on here too, so I might as well fit that in there too. So I set the compass to that. I've got my center for the motor marked right here, so I can just draw a circle. It's a bit of a rough cut because that blade was too wide for that radius, but the hole is big enough. Now drilling the mounting hole for the drive wheel, and I like to turn that slowly as I drill, which will counteract any angle error from the drill press. I was thinking of finishing this pulley on the motor, but maybe I'll just rough it a bit on here. It fits a bit loose on the 8mm shaft, but let's see if I can still trim down here. Trimming that wheel with the loose hole in the shaft worked much better than expected, so I've already got the finished surface on it now. I need this spaced a little bit from the shoulder of that shaft. And those washers should put it just the right position. And I've filed some slight keyways in there, which might be necessary to lock this onto the shaft. I won't put anything in there for now though. Well, I can spin this pulley on the shaft, so I'll definitely need to put some screws in that keyway. But I'll leave that till later. I'm clamping the pieces together like this to transfer the screw hole locations for perfect alignment. So now it turns out my belt is too short. Where did I go wrong? So then I spent a bit of time puzzling over how I would have deviated from my CAD model to come up with this error. But it turns out the error was actually in the CAD model itself. I had miscalculated the length of the belt. Fortunately, I was only off by a little bit. I had the foresight to draw some circles for the motor positions before I cut the big hole. I want to close off this hole here a bit later to keep the dust away from the motor, but for now I just want to try it out. Belt is now vertical, and it tracks too, so I think I can screw this on in this very position. I made some wooden spacers to keep this top pulley lined up in the middle. And another spacer to keep the bottom wheel in place. And this wiggles a bit. There's going to be an adjustment thingy, but right now I'm just using a wedge to fix that in place for tracking. Okay, moment of truth. Time to spin it up for the first time. Whoa! I was hoping that motor would have a bit more power than that, but I think it'll be okay. I quite like that sander, but the motor just seemed way underpowered, so I was thinking of switching to a different motor that I had lying around, a 2/3 horsepower motor, but unfortunately this motor turns the wrong way, so I would have had to mirror the whole sander. But if you've been paying close attention, you might already realize what the problem actually was. I forgot to lock the drive wheel to the shaft, and with that locked on, the motor is quite adequate. This strip sander still needs a few finishing details like a platen enclosure base switch, but it works, and I think I'll end this video right here.